It is well known that the anti-Semitic ideology of National Socialism developed from the Völkisch movement that emerged in the late 19th century. Starting with thinkers such as Houston Stewart Chamberlain, Theodor Fritsch, Paul de Lagarde, and others, a multitude of ideologies or orders developed, all of which had racism and anti-Semitism as their common basis. It is also known that all of these different ideas had another thing in common besides anti-Semitism. They all had a different religious worldview as the basis for their own ideology. In the next few minutes, I would like to try to give you an idea of how broadly and different emphasis such systems.
Dirk, sorry, I think you're too far from your microphone.
Right.
Try to be closer.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. It's so better?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's better.
No,
Yeah, I think it's better.
Okay, thank you for Of course, I do not just want to show you what kinds of groups there were, but also try to show you what consequences such ideas had. I will only use examples from German-speaking countries. However, I would like to stress that in the 20th century, there were also groups outside of Germany who saw their racism as a divine order that needed to be restored. One of the best known such groups is certainly Romanian Iron Guard around Corneliu Cotreanu, which had massive influence in Romania and whose most famous member was none other than the thinker Mircea Eliade. My first example is from the area of present-day Austria, more precisely from Lower Austria in the north of Vienna. So you have possibility to find Vienna. The Habsburg Empire was a multi-ethnic empire in which the German-speaking population ruled, but was a minority in its empire compared to the slaves, the Hungarians. In the 19th century, a German ethnic movement developed here that advocated unification with Germany, propagated extreme anti-Semitism. Even thought he has been completely forgotten today. In my opinion, Frank Xaver Kiesling can be seen as the person who made anti-Semitism socially acceptable in Austria. Kiesling, born in Vienna in 1859, completed a technical degree. However, he was only able to work in this field for a few years because he had an eye illness. He concentrated on collecting local objects from former times from the area north of Vienna and even opened his own museum there. During his study, Kiesling was also a passionate gymnast. The gymnastic movement, maybe you know, was the sport movement par excellence in the 19th century and combined sport with national or racist ideas. The founder of the gymnastic movement, Friedrich Jahn, saw sporting activity as the best way to keep the folk meets here and units a racist understanding of the people of the nation. A healthy mind needs a healthy body was the motto of the nationalist gymnastic movement, and Kiesling used this to propagate his hateful anti-Semitism. Within his anti-Semitic movement, he gained international fame in 1887 when, in his role as head gymnastic coach of the first Vienna Gymnastics Club, he had the first ever Aryan paragraph written in the club's office. As a result, almost 500 gymnastics had to leave the club, Kiesling viewed as Jews in racial terms, regardless of their religious self-image. After the Austrian Anschluss into the Third Reich in 1938, the Nazis praised Kiesling for the quotations, creation of this first Aryan paragraph and the creator of the Aryan paragraph. And in the Third Reich, these formed the basis for the social exclusion and physical elimination of Jews. So the Nazi press even thought Kiesling never engaged in party politics. He was already considered a champion and herald of racial anti-Semitism during his lifetime. He limited himself to agitation within the domestic life, which was popular at the time, and published writings on historical and folklore topics, as well as anti-Semitic pamphlets. His treatise on early history, which do not meet any scientific standards, are permitted with the heroic Teutonic ideology. This was intended to serve the purpose of presenting the northern region of Vienna as a supposedly ancient Teutonic settlement area in early history, which in turn could legitimize calls for the elimination of Jews in the present in this area. His writings were accordingly popular in folkish anti-Semitic circles and served as a source of inspiration for pan-Germanic representatives such as Hitler and Guido List, the founding father of the Turkish movement. In short, it can be said that Kiesling brought anti-Semitism to the public in Austria. He justified this with alleged ancient Teutonic finds that showed that the area north of Vienna to be an ancient Teutonic settlement area. And it was only Judaism and popular poetry changed, and the modernly brought also by the Judaism led to a complete racial decline among Germans. We recognize the richest worldview in this, the natural order once created, is threatened by Judaism, and it's the task of every German to restore this order. Even as Richard thought was not very important to Kiesling, Guido List, who was a friend of Kiesling, further developed the religious component. And as you may know, Guido List and his student Jörg Lanz were considered sources of inspiration for other people. While Kiesling's worldview was based on Teutonic ideas, my second example is the exact opposite of Arthur Dinter. Just like Kiesling, Dinter was a fanatic anti-Semite. However, he envisioned the restoration of an alleged original Christianity. Christianity had been completely distorted by Jewish influences, especially the Old Testament, the teaching of God. But Dinter was not only concerned with the de-Judaification of Christianity. He developed a religious concept based on race and evolution. He took his racist idea from Houston Stewart Chamberlain, whom he was in close contact. Dinter's evolutionary view of religion can be explained as follows. The body is the instrument of the soul. A higher or good spirit requires a higher developed organism for its spiritual tasks. A lower or bad spirit conversely seeks to be close to the animal world to indulge law, drives and passions. Bodies are the function of race. The higher races serve as the abode of bad and lower spirits. The most noble spirits choose to inhabit the most suitable biological groups in race. Self-seeking, evil ones choose to reflect people. The former possesses low intelligence and naive selfishness. Jews are infinitely more menaces because they have high intelligence to place in their service for sexual gratification, material gratification. Or in Dinter's own words, race is everything. It is the key not only to the history of mankind, of nations, of families, but also for individual personality. Everything I am, feel, think, everything that has developed within me is solely to matters. Except for my religion, race is the highest and holiest that I am. I owe my religion to my race because only my race would be possible profound inner and understanding of religious religion. Race and religion are one. Is it therefore not surprising that in the late 1920s, Dinter even founded his own religious community, the Geist Christliche Gemeinschaft of English Christianity, Spirit, a kind of spiritualistic Christianity. As we have already heard, race was at this concept with the Aryans, of course, being God's chosen people. The Jewish God was in fact not the God at all, but Satan, and the Jews were Satan's chosen people. Dinter was also one of the first members of the Nazi Party and had regular contact with Hitler in the early 1920s. In 1924, Hitler even made Dinter the NSDAP Gauleiter of Thuringia. However, Dinter's religious values soon became too extreme for Hitler, and he feared that he might come into conflict with the established churches because of Dinter. Therefore, 3 years later, Hitler deposed Dinter as Gauleiter and he was thrown out of the party. In 1937, Heinrich Himmler even banned the geistchristliche Religionsgemeinschaft that Dinter still had and which had been officially called German Volkskirche since 1934. But what made Dinter a pioneer of Nazi ideology was not his religious concepts, but his portrayed antisemitism. He transformed this together with an extreme form of anti-Semitic stereotypes into novels. His trilogy, The Sin Against the Blood, The Sin Against the Spirit, and The Sin Against Love, found around 1.5 million readers, and Hitler also used them several times directly in his book Mein Kampf. With his novel, Dinter coined the term incest, for example, as well as the idea that sex with Jews alone leads to contamination of its own genetic makeup. Of course, races are part of God's creation, and mixing with Jews directly interferes with divine creation, which is why it was necessary to remove Jews from German society in order to preserve the race. If you read the novels mentioned above, you will find a number of stereotypes that we later find in Nazi ideology. For example, it was Dinter assumed that Jewish men were very sexually active and that Jews would always try to seduce Aryans in order to Judaize the Aryan genetic heritage. Apart from the fact that this is, of course, also an extremely sexist image of a woman who are supposedly just stupid and can be seduced by anyone, find here the justification for the ban on marriage and sexual intercourse between Jews and Germans introduced under the Nazi government. It was people like Dinter who reached an audience of millions of people long before 1933. However, these stereotypes only function on the basis of religious foundations, for example, that sexual intercourse between Jews and Aryans would destroy the divine order and the Aryans would place themselves in the hands of Satan. Jews, or as helpers of Satan, was already a well-known motive in Christian anti-Semitism. Now, the Aryans are highlighted as the chosen people who had to be protected. Dinter builds on an already known motive and develops it further in such a way that the only option left to save God's creation is the elimination of Judaism. With his books, which have been, as I said, read millions of times, Dinter had already prepared the way to de-Judification, portraying the Jews as satanic non-humans who had to be eliminated, killed. But Dinter himself was unable to implement this idea. His organization, Deutsche Volkskirche, had only 3 members, and he himself was excluded from the. It had no access to power at all. And that brings me to my last example, a Protestant group that was actually able to put its racial anti-Semitism into practice from 1933 onwards, the German Christian Church movement. The end of the World War greatly challenged Protestant regional church in Germany, since the connection between throne and altar exists until the German Empire closed. This means that the regional ruler, like the king, were no longer the head of the regional church. Despite the new parliamentary constitution granted specific rights to the churches, this was still a downgrading in comparison to the position in the former Kaiserreich. Additionally, public criticism of the church by Democrats and communists caused a massive rise in church memberships. Not forgotten that until 1930, the Catholic Center Party was part of every German government. For many Protestants, this was seen as a reform. The reason for this sentiment was the position of Protestantism in the Kaiserreich as a state religion to some extent, notwithstanding since the German Kaiser himself was a great supporter of Protestantism. Besides this, the early years of the Weimar Republic were marked by uprisings of right-wing and left-wing, as well as collapse of the monetary system in 1923. For this reason, the Protestant churches see the early years of the Weimar Republic as a major crisis. For many priests and theologians, this demise began with the French Revolution. Individualization was considered to be the incarnation of all negative developments of Germany and German Protestantism. And already in 1918, there were several voices of Protestant theologians that assumed Judaism beyond all negative influences such as labor movement, communism, liberalism, and all this stuff, you know. I do not want to elaborate on the subject at this point and lead over German Christians. Particularly, young theologians considered the collapse of the Kaiserreich and the chaos of the Republic as a divine punishment. Two young theology students, Siegfried Nettler and Julius Solorheimer, can be identified as examples of this lost generation. Both were born in 1900 and fought in nationalist paramilitary associations after 1990 against communist and so-called Freikorps. Both hated democracy and had early contact with the Nazi Party. Due to their political alignment with National Socialism, both had to resign their positions as vicars of the Bavarian Regional Church. So, in 1927, they changed to Thuringia, took over two small communities in the eastern part of Thuringia, a stronghold area of labor movement. So it was an area, a red area. There, Nettler and Leutheiser began with the setup of a new church movement called the German Christians. Completely in line with the Nazi Party, they organized recreational offerings, arranged torchlight processions, carried about the youth, and gave presentations on history of religion. Sorry, one moment. They intended a separation from the old church, not only through Christian teaching, also through direct action. They intended to attract people to the church. In the area where churches were hardly visited, Nettler and Leutheiser managed, however, through their involvement quickly to find supporters. This success was mostly because they combined church teaching with present-day policy. By references to the Bible, the inner church group tried to that Marxism and liberalism were the greatest in Germany. Certainly, from the point of view of the German Christians, beyond liberalism, Marxism was always the Jew. For this reason, it was a divine duty of every single Christian in Germany to combat Marxism and liberalism, and so also Judaism. Such religious thinking is not new, since often in Christian imagination crisis situations were interpreted as punishment. So you see it in the whole history of Christianity. But instead of taking a stand for a recollection in a purely theological sense, the Thuringian German Christians demanded a reinforced political involvement of non-Christians in Jews, only in the sense of National Socialism. Rather, the intention was to adjust church to the present time, which is indicated in the strong political involvement. Completely, in the sense of Martin Luther's two kingdom doctrine, one considered political leadership as divine will. German Christians understand the German folk as the chosen people of God, course, who had to return to their divine mission. And to fulfill this mission, Germany had to follow the divinely brought leader. This was, of course, Adolf Hitler. That's why they call themselves the SA Jesus Christ, the Sturmabteilung. And for this reason, a new Christian awareness was only possible for German Christians under the leadership of the Nazis. From 1931, German Christians declared first successes in church elections in Thuringia by mid-January 1933. So Hitler wasn't in power. They even were the strongest faction in Thuringia, which indicated that their agenda was widely approved by Thuringian Protestants. Following this election victory, Deutsche Christen to the regional church of Thuringia and Deber to keep it until 1945. During the course of the 1930s, other regional churches joined Deutsche Christen. At this point, I would like to give an example of how German Christians realized Protestantism and the ideology. In April 1933, the Nazis established a law by which they could release Jews from public service, but not only people of Jewish faith. This law, since Jew was referred to as a term of racist categorization. This meant that also Christians who were considered racial Jews. The German Christians adopted this law and released all church employees of their own church who were considered as racial Jews, even thought they were Christians. Through this action, membership of Christianity was turned into a racial issue. Only areas became Christians. And in the following years, the German Christians adopted all Nazi laws pertaining to this group. Simple church members considered as racial Jews when those that accepted the church service were no longer regarded as Christians. So German Christians began during the 1930s to de-Judaize their church. Likewise, the Nazis did it in the Third Reich. And after the November pogroms of 1948, they believed it was the right time to de-Judaize entire Christianity. You can read it in a letter to the bishops of Thuringia and Quebec. It is apart from this fundamental question, because only a few days after the and task, I am also of the opinion that now, in connection with the general cleansing of the German national all Jews, it is a time that either the German Christians, by programmatic demand, or it must also be the German Christian church in the same direction. At the same time, the German state began deporting Jews to concentration camps. Within this process, de-Judaification, German Christians started to eliminate Jewish Christianity. To foster this project, he founded the Institute for the Study and Eradication of Jewish Influences in German Church Life in May 1959. Round about 200 German-speaking priests and professors of theology joined this. And of course, at the Wartburg in Iceland. The place was well-known chosen. This was the place Martin Luther translated the Bible. The Wartburg is therefore still the symbol, and it was the tradition that the German Christians saw themselves. Luther had begun his Reformation and defeated Catholicism, but the Reformation had not yet come to an end. Luther had defeated papacy and Judaism. Judaism had nothing in common with Christianity from the point of view of German Christians. Rather, Jesus had fought Judaism. After the death of Jesus, Judaism even more than Christianity. Those for the German Christians, the papacy was only a continuation of the Jewish rule of Jerusalem temple. Luther had recognized this and defeated the papacy. Luther, from the point of view of the German Christians, therefore had taken the first step unique teaching of Jesus. But the problem of Judaism failed. As long as the Jews built, this was not a particular problem either. During the opening ceremony of the Institute, Walter Grundmann, professor of Völkisch theology at the University of Vienna and scientific director of the Institute, pointed out, let us be clear at this point, as only a few people could imagine in Luther's time how one could be a Christian with the authority of the Pope, which is a self-evident thing for us. It is not yet possible for many people to imagine how can someone, without reference to the salvation history of the Old Testament, without the monopoly concept of the Church, conserve Christianity in the Church. We are convinced that the history of the coming decades will from Grundmann went on to say that the fight against Judaism was abandoned to the German folk. This is why the elimination of all Jewish influence had become the painful question for the churches in Germany. Accordingly, Jewish words and references from sacred songs as well as from the entire liturgy should be eliminated. And it is also necessary to eliminate the historical context of the Old Testament. Grundmann therefore demanded to negate the historical rootness of Christianity, Judaism, into this by means of supposedly scientific evidence. The Institute for the Study and Eradication of Jewish Influences in German church life, with its anti-Semitic, was the greatest research institute in the Third Reich within the research of the so-called Jewish question. It was bigger than the state institutes. This institute, Grundmann said, had to make its contribution to the Second War. This was in October 1941. The society, shortly after the war against the Soviet Union, the society of German struggle for the freedom and life more important than the struggle against destructive power. Everywhere these destructive powers, the Jew becomes the task of German spiritual and religious sciences is even greater. For the struggle accompanies the struggle of the workers. The Institute did not attempt to lead such a struggle solely through academic aids and scientific publication. Rather, it was a question of evidence for the power of the Jew within nearly 20,000 years of Christianity. And such proofs should be implemented in large projects. For example, in 1940, the Institute published in 200,000 copies a de-Judaized version of the New Testament called the Message of God, or Even Gottes. 1 year later, followed the de-Judaized hymnal, We Praise You. In these two books, Jesus was transfigured into the and one of these books was the New Bible for the German folk. Conclusion. Hopefully, I'm just in time. I wanted to explain the following. The thought thinkers of National Socialism had already argued for the complete elimination of Judaism long before it came to power. The basis of interpretations of different religious beliefs. The arguments for such an elimination were also different, but all were based on the religious idea that the Germans were God's chosen folk. God means here not the Christian God. And the greatest enemy, of course, was Judaism, which was in the process of destroying the Here we are always dealing with a kind of apocalyptic idea, a final battle between good and evil, so that the Aryans are not destroyed by the evil must be completed, eliminated. This would also restore divine order. So there was no real radicalization when the Nazis came to power. The ideas and the models had long been present and formulated in public before 1933. The disciples decisive turning point in 1933 was that the state suddenly began to implement the long-standing demand of oppression and exclusion. We can see this clearly in the German Christians. They had similar religious ideas to Dinter, but unlike Dinter, they had the corresponding possibilities within a sphere of influence to actually carry out the de-Jurification. They did not follow the National Socialists out of obedience or even fear, but out of religious conviction. In the form of the German Christians, thought thinkers became perpetrators. National Socialism was the political power that put the anti-Semitism into action. Conversely, through thought thinkers like Kiesling and Dinter paved the way for National Socialism by making these stereotypes socially acceptable long before 1933 with the help of religious arguments, some obvious, some hidden. The idea of dispossession and destruction of the Jews was not Hitler's idea. People like Kiesling, Dinter, Chamberlain, etc. shaped large parts of German-speaking society long before Hitler. And once in power, Nazis could rely on movements like the German Christians actively participated in preparation and implementation of the killings of the European Jews, argumentatively to some extent in practice. Thank you.